In today's session, Dr. Anna Tavis and Louis Garrett will offer their thoughts on how organizations will be managing their talent in the decades to come. Dr. Anna Tavis is Associate Professor of Human Capital Management at New York University, Senior Lecturer at the Latin American Business School, and the Executive Director for the Innovation Radar Network with Executive Networks. Dr. Tavis is Senior Editor of People Plus Strategy Journal, a publication of ARPS. She is the co-editor of the 2 volumes of essays, Point Counterpoint, New Perspectives on People and Strategy. Her article, co-authored with Peter Capelli, The Performance Management Revolution, appeared in HBR in October 2016 and made HBR's 2018 must-read list. Dr. Tavis has published extensively on issues of the changing workplace. Her new research is focused on the emergence of the Agile talent management practice. She's a frequent keynote speaker and executive consultant to mature and emerging organizations. Prior to joining NYU faculty, Dr. Tavis navigated a diverse global career in business and organizational consulting. Dr. Tavis was the head of Motorola's EMEA organizational development function based in London, Nokia's global head of talent management based in Helsinki, Chief Learning Officer with United Technologies Corporation based in Hartford, Connecticut, and Global Head of Talent and Organizational Development with AIG Investments based in New York. Born in St. Petersburg, Russia, she got her PhD at Princeton University and Executive MBA from the University of South Carolina. Dr. Tavis speaks English, Russian, German, Spanish, and is an avid Ashtanga yoga practitioner. Easy for me to say. Our other speaker today is Mr. Louis Garrett. Louis leads Mercer Sirotta's growth marketing's consultant practice, where he applies his training in organizational psychology and experience in the development of employee feedback and engagement programs to help HR and executives link them to organizational strategies and goals. His training in statistics and organization science helps clients make better use of the HR data they have. His focus is helping to unlock the potential of people through developing more engaging places to work. Having held a number of positions at Mercer Sirota, Louis was promoted to managing director in 2012 to oversee Mercer Sirota's operations in Asia Pacific. In this role, Louis is a member of Mercer Sirota's global board of directors. Day to day, Louis has responsibility for managing operational activities, maintaining and building client and partner relationships, as well as advising clients on analysis, follow-up, and improvement strategies. He regularly works with diverse international executives and HR teams across the region, including Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, helping the world's largest public and private organizations use psychological data to deliver improved organizational effectiveness. During his career at EMEA, Louis led the implementation and evolution of several global engagement projects for Mercer Sirota's largest clients, including companies like Shell, Rolls-Royce, and TNT. Chartered by the British Psychological Society as an occupational psychologist, Louis graduated from the University of Nottingham in the UK with a Master of Science in Occupational Psychology and a first-class honors Bachelor of Science in Psychology and Cognitive Neuroscience. Louis is also qualified by the British Psychological Society to use both ability tests and personality questionnaires, although he specializes in employee attitude assessments. We're so pleased to have both of you with us today. Please go ahead and share with us what you know about talent management.
Okay, thank you very much. Are we going to see the slides? So what Louis and I decided to do for today to get us into the future is to start with where talent management really comes from. And it did take us back to the 1880s and even prior to that, to the early 20th century. Talent management started, unsurprisingly, in 2 major areas. One was the Army, where prior to World War I and during the World War I, in the American Army, there were first practices of identifying performance among the soldiers to be able to promote some of them to officer positions. So those practices were widely spreading in the Army, and during World War II, they were actually officer promotions in the US Army were based on that merit selection. At the same time, the parallel track was happening in the industry. And in around 1880s, the movement that was called Taylorism, founded by Frederick Taylor, was called scientific management. It was the first time that science and process design were used to increase productivity, to analyze the work process of the workers, break it down, and then by doing so, the target was effectiveness, efficiency, and productivity. And what's important to us, thinking about talent management in those times, or what we know now as talent management, the first signs of talent management, is definitely where the economies of the countries were at that time: industrialization, manufacturing primarily. That's where scientific management was practiced, and clearly the overall context where, you know, the rate of change, the innovation was important, but it took much longer cycles. Therefore, these scientific, very regimented, very at what seems now bureaucratic processes were in place, and they were working. So that takes us all the way through the 20th century to the 1980s, a century later, when, and as we go to the next slide, when the study of talent started to emerge and flourish and fool. It started with the turn in the economic cycle, when the talent was multiple, when it was just a matter of identifying from the army of lifers who were better to climb the management ladder. The talent management, the economy started to accelerate, innovation came in, and it was important to identify who those top talents in companies were. And that's where McKinsey launched their study that gave the name and the title to this whole trend of talent management. So the name, the word talent comes from the McKinsey study that was done in the early 1990s. I personally participated in that study. At that time, I just started on my corporate career at Motorola, and we were very much at that juncture of Motorola as a technology company, at that time was a manufacturing company, transitioning to technology and just breaking into that very early stages of innovation age. That's when the conversation, the word talent started to appear through the McKinsey study, was very, very important. As far as the practices were concerned, they definitely were introduced by GE and their visionary at that time, and again, 1980s visionary CEO, Jack Welch, who, and I have a quote there on the slide, who said that it was really important to identify the right people at the right place at the right time, and it was definitely the economy where the best mattered. It was all about identifying that top talent, not so much high potential at that time, but that high talent that the companies needed to nurture. And forced ranking was introduced at that time. Again, very regimented processes put in place that gave name the 9-box to the 9-box, to the calibrations, to C sessions, etc., that gave the practices and the name to what we now know as talent management. That fast forward to the early 21st century, and again, with the acceleration of innovation cycles, the economy is changing, the leading industries are different. Again, even GE itself, from being a manufacturing company, is becoming a Internet of Things company, technology company, and technology is the underlying operating system for a lot of businesses these days. So this significant change, and that's where the disruption, serious disruption, is beginning to occur in our views, in our treatment of talent in the organization. And that's where Louis and I want to give you more insight into what's happening now and what trends are going to happen in the future. In summary, from 1880 to 1980 and finally to 2018, we see that the war for talent was started and the talent won. Now is the time when the talent is in the driving seat, and we want to share with you what actually, in terms of practices and managing this talent in organization, what's changing, what's important for us to know and understand. And at this point, I'm giving the mic to Louis to continue.
So what I thought I would do is take you through a quick walk through where we are today with the talent agenda. I mean, Anna's done a good job there of just giving us a sense of where the practice of talent management has come from. And what I'll do is share with you a few ideas about where I think the practice lies today and some of the big opportunities that we have that are emerging now and in the near future. So Anna started with a sort of reference there to Frederick Taylor, the father of scientific management. And in Taylor's perspective, the role of leaders and managers in an organization was really to break work down into small, manageable chunks that could be measured, and then find ways to improve the productivity of workers, to reduce time and increase the volume of output that people would make at work. Now, while that was successful initially, what we tended to find was the outcome of the work that was generated by scientific management made it very boring and frankly demotivating. And as the slide shows today, the modern workplace is dramatically different to the time that Frederick Taylor designed his ideas around scientific management. The smiling face here in the top left-hand corner of this slide, this is a gentleman called Professor William Kahn. And Bill Kahn was at Boston University in the early 90s. And he really is what some consider to be the father of employee engagement. And what Bill identified was that, look, when people come to work, they make a real choice about the level of energy and commitment that they can put in. And before that time, really, a lot of the way that managers, leaders, and HR functions were approaching the topic of motivation and engagement was really all around finding the right people, putting them in the right job, and then rewarding them the right way. And Bill had really started to think about, well, hold on a second, isn't the management capability, quality, and work environment that we provide to these people important? And indeed, we see these topics coming ever present in the business literature and indeed in the HR literature. And right now, we really do see the nature of work and our attitudes towards work really changing, reflecting some of the drive that we see around improving the quality of work and the way that technology and innovation is influencing our approach, particularly to talent management and HR. So here on the left-hand side, some of the big trends that we're seeing, really not influencing work in the future, but influencing work right now. Globalization, talent, which means that work can be done anywhere. The digitalization of significant components of tasks that lead to things like robotics and automation, artificial intelligence helping us make smarter decisions, and the drive towards the consumerization of many experiences, the requirement to have consumer-grade experiences for everything, even in the workplace. On the right-hand side here, you can see what we consider to be the future of talent, emerging trends that are influencing not just socio-demographic outcomes, but also the work itself, because these are the types of people that we have to do the work. Multiple generations, you know, so people are living longer, and as such, you tend to have many more generations of people in the workplace. The rise of the free agent, people wanting to work for themselves, either as an entrepreneur or as part of the gig economy. The digital social world, where interaction increasingly is done online, and the question around the pending retirement of baby boomers, you know, the very large generation after the Second World War, who have contributed so much growth and economic productivity. And together, these things are really shaping a new perspective on the way that work is done. So I think this equation on the screen in front of you outlines the current thinking really around how we see workplace performance. There are three significant strategic buckets. The first is talent, which, you know, we'll spend a little more time on today. So this is getting the right people in the right jobs, making sure that we can build, buy, or borrow the kind of talent we need to help our businesses succeed. The second is engagement, the extent to which we provide a work environment that we have the leadership and management practices that are needed to get people feeling motivated and engaged at work. And the idea is that the combination of these two things leads to better performance, increased contribution, productivity, citizenship of people at work. Now, while this is sort of simplistic and attractive, I think it sort of makes sense. What I find very interesting about all of these concepts is that while we all agree they all sound important, the definitions of them vary very widely. I'm sure all of the people who are listening to this right now might have a different idea of what talent is, what engagement is, and indeed even what performance is in their organization and for individuals. And I think that is one of the most significant challenges that we face today in the workplace, which is that we talk about many things as if we know what they are, but we really don't. And so that leads me to a second, and I think probably most pertinent question of the day, which is talent for what? And, you know, we started with Anna telling us a little bit about the emergence of talent management and the importance of talent as a differentiator for business performance. And as those practices have reached into organizations and become more commonplace, we've started to talk about talent as if it's obvious, as if we know what it is, and that it's almost universally important. And so there's been a lot of research in this area, a lot of people thinking about what it means to have and find and develop really talented people. So if you review some of that research, some by business professors, others by psychologists, in some cases by consultancies or HR functions themselves, you know, I like this model, which, you know, kind of then starts to break down what we think of or mean right now when we talk about talent. So the first, and I think most commonly used definition, is the technical skills and capabilities that people bring to work. Basically what the person knows and what he or she can learn in future. And indeed, right now, I would argue that this is one of the hottest topics for business leaders and HR leaders. How do we keep and develop the right technical skills for the future of our organizations? For friends and colleagues joining us in Singapore, you'll know that, for example, the Skills Future initiatives are really targeted in this area, trying to figure out how to develop the workforce so that it maintains its relevance, capability, and indeed productivity into the future. However, it's a limited definition because, as you can see from the other buckets here, there are many other aspects of an individual that you can consider to be talent, not just his or her ability and technical capability, which is an important foundation, but also their personality and other human characteristics they bring to work. For example, how likable the person is. Is this person good at dealing with others? How calm, stable, and well organized the person is. Is he or she very much in control of themselves? And indeed, their propensity and capacity for leadership, the extent to which they show ambition and drive, political savvy, being able to get what they need from other people, and are good at delegating and directing others. And indeed, one of the, I think, main tensions and arguments in modern talent management practice is the separation between the importance of technical talent and skills and those that are more leadership or people-oriented in nature. You know, how important is it to get, as a friend of mine says, personality in the right place? And in fact, how do you find those people who are not just technically capable, but also able to deliver leadership and managerial performance as they progress through the organization? And one of the reasons we think that is important and why in modern talent management practice this has become a particular focus, you know, the classic focus on high potential talent, which usually means that the person is more suitable for more senior leadership positions in the company, is because leaders add a significant amount of value. And one of the reasons they do is because that job is incredibly complicated. So careful research and studies from academic psychologists and business academics alike has identified findings like this one on the slide, that as job complexity increases, the value of talent, i.e. the value that top talent can add to your organization, becomes much higher, much faster. So the difference, for example, for highly complex jobs, such as senior leadership roles and very complex technical work, for the contribution of a top performer is more than double that of someone who is average. And so, you know, this is really where the talent rubber hits the, you know, business road, so to say. The point being that, you know, if you can find top performers and put them in these very complex jobs, then they will add disproportionate amounts of value. However, while, you know, that research has been done and we've been considering, okay, so now we know that talent adds a lot of value in terms of performance, we've also been changing the way that we think about performance. And in the modern workplace, we go much beyond just whether or not the person delivers well in their job. So here on the screen right now is from some research, and you can see it cited in the bottom right-hand corner there by some Dutch researchers in which they released in 2010. And what it's showing us is that what they did is they looked across all of the papers they can find, measuring and looking to understand individual performance at work, because what they wanted to know is, okay, so, you know, we talk about performance and the contribution of talent as if we all know what that means. What are we actually measuring and studying when it comes to performance at work? And so they developed this sort of taxonomy or heuristic framework for individual performance. What you can see here is that while task performance is something that, you know, many studies are interested, task performance would be, for example, the quality of work that you produce or the level of the amount of that you would sell. There are also many other aspects to performance in the modern era that we're interested in. Contextual performance, which is the extent to which the person goes outside of their job to provide influence and input into the broader organization environment. Adaptive performance, which is the extent to which the person contributes new ideas and helps the organization change and move forward. and indeed, and a particularly critical one, is counterproductive work behavior, the extent to which the person displays behavior that is actually damaging to the performance of the organization or their co-workers. And in fact, it's also very interesting that sometimes those with the best task performance are those that display the most frequent counterproductive work behavior. And so thinking more broadly about how we view and evaluate individual performance in talent is actually very important and becoming more commonplace. So Anna also talked about how we have been thinking about, or many researchers have been thinking about, the influence of star performers and top talent in their organization, and whether or not performance management processes really keep up with our modern understanding about the contribution of people at work. And the slide in front of you here shows you, you can see the very, very typically and widely used normal distribution or bell curve, which is used by many companies to assign and evaluate levels of performance. It was developed and championed by GE in the 1990s, where a small number of people can be exceptional, a large number of people are average, and then a number of people equivalent to the number of high performers are below average or perhaps not contributing as much as they should. And the dark area of the slide, the shaded gray area, represents some new ideas that are emerging that help us understand the contribution of star performers in the workplace. So this is what we call a power law distribution. And the idea here is that the vast majority of people are actually fairly average. 80% of folks who come to work are not doing a bad job. They're just contributing to an average extent, and so their performance should be evaluated as such. But what we find is those people who are delivering exceptional performance, who are exceptionally talented, deliver many, many times the contribution of an average performer, and therefore actually should be evaluated and rewarded as such. And so some companies, for example, Google, if you read Laszlo Bock's book Work Rules, Google uses this power law distribution to distribute reward. They see that their top performers are disproportionately valuable and generate disproportionate levels of value to an average performer, and therefore have designed a reward system that would accommodate for that. So, I find it very interesting that some companies are considering now shifting to this idea that, if you get to the performance process and you are finding that people are below average, perhaps your line managers are not doing their job. They aren't addressing performance issues early enough. The idea that most people are, in fact, kind of average at work and doing an okay or good job, but that there are some people who are exceptional and delivering disproportionate value and should be rewarded as such. So now we are also seeing the influence of technology, and I really think that the idea of talent signals is compelling and interesting. And here, you can see a couple of articles on the left-hand side that we have contributed to this debate around how technology will fundamentally influence the way that we think about talent, measure it, and evaluate it. And many new tools are emerging to try and understand how we can pick up these talent signals, how we can know whether or not we have a talented person, and evaluate that in a more robust and less biased way. Things like using games or social media evaluation, digital interviews, so removing the human part of the interview process to make it less biased, to analyze the way that people interact and communicate with each other, kind of language and behavior they use, in order to be able to understand who this person is and whether or not they are could be considered top talent, without having to rely on often very biased and highly risky line manager evaluations of talent. So, what we're finding is that this is really moving the performance management practice and evaluation of talent to be much more around a real-time evaluation. And something like Uber ratings, I make a joke here, Tinder being a great way that this kind of principle has now been applied to dating talent. Trying to figure out who the right partner is. You can do that with apps. And, as people use these tools, you find that the evaluations of others becomes more open, transparent, faster, and based on multiple inputs rather than just one opinion, like a senior line leader. Last slide from me, and then I'm going to hand over to Anna to hear some of her really interesting ideas around talent teams and the way that Agile is influencing the talent agenda. There are two, I think, issues that we need to consider for the future of talent management practice that I think are particularly important. The first, on the left-hand side here, you'll recognize, I think, these two familiar faces. They're not Bond villains. These are real business leaders, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. And, my point here is, and I make this in the HR People and Strategy contribution from the most recent journal that was released, that we're actually starting to think differently about problem solving as a way to identify talent. There are many highly sophisticated technical problem solvers, but what we've seen is most of the most celebrated and successful leaders of our time have actually been more effective at thinking through and finding and identifying the right problems to solve. So fixing the problem actually becomes easy if you're able to build the right team. Identifying the most meaningful, important, and pertinent problem seems to be something that highly talented and very influential people do extremely effectively. And Dan Pink also talks about this. So if you think about what these two people are trying to do, Elon Musk in particular, put people on Mars, generate driverless cars with electronic batteries, so we free ourselves from the need of hydrocarbons, those sorts of things that are really influential for the future of humanity and the planet, big, meaty problems that need to be fixed. He's identified those as the things that he wants to work on. Very inspiring and compelling for the people that work on those projects. The second area here is around the talent curse, and something that's very rarely talked about is the fact that when we identify people as talented and tell them, they often carry it around as baggage and start to consider the fact that they have to seem talented in all interactions. And in many cases, we've seen high potential or talent programs perhaps even do more damage than good for some kinds of people because they feel the need then to constantly appear as talented in numerous situations. So two things I think that have kind of come about as we've seen talent management evolve that still need further consideration and are very important for modern high potential programs. So Anna, I'm going to hand back to you to talk us a little bit through the agile processes and some of the emerging and exciting trends in this space.
Okay. Thank you very much, Louis. I hope I come through clearly because I have a few technical issues here on my end. But from our perspective here in the US, I clearly support what Louis has just presented about growing complexity and understanding of individuals and what constitute individual performance. And the way talent is used in this narrative is really around looking at individuals within the organization and trying to differentiate. Differentiation is key to what Louis has presented. The whole instrumentation around talent is becoming sophisticated, technology enabled. At the same time is, really going deep into the psychology. What I want to present is an alternative direction in which talent conversation is moving. We found ourselves at the turn of the century with a significant, as I said, acceleration of innovation and breakthroughs in technology that really displaced manufacturing and other industries in leading the workplace. So technology does bring a lot of that new way of operating business that is also becoming a reflection on how we think about people in the organization. And by that I mean the way of working. If before we work in a waterfall model, any one of you who has done project management remembers the waterfall charts and milestones and planning involved in getting work done. It's important because I will explain to you how this change in project management is reflecting on what we are thinking and how we are looking at talent these days in organizations. So what happened was that in order to accelerate that innovation cycle, and you see on my chart here, enter the age of Agile, projects are done in the iterative ways. This waterfall has been broken into smaller cycles, and the work is done by teams. Yes, there are individuals, and it's important for us to understand who is on the team. At the same time, that big chunk of a project that needs to be performed in order to meet the client expectations that are changing on a daily basis had to be broken into multiple, almost daily sprints. That's the term that is being used. And enters the team. The team is becoming a most important unit in organizational performance. So what we found ourselves is that all of our talent management practices were focused exactly on what Lewis has described as an individual, with all of the psychologies of performance, engagement of an individual, our surveys, and the psychological science has been designed around understanding all the way to the brain function of an individual. And we do not have as granular of an understanding, even though we do have team development, etc., in our repertoire. It still breaks it down to who are the individuals on the team. So what Agile brought to us, the Agile way of operating, the Agile way of running projects, the Agile development that came from software, is the acute understanding of the importance of the collaborative aspect of our work and the impact of a team cohesion and ability of people to work on teams, regardless of how talented they are on their own, into the center of this Agile conversation. So in my view, and I may be a little bit biased because I've spent the last couple of years looking at how performance management has transformed and how teams are working in these more and more agile organizations. So we found ourselves really needing to understand that collaboration much better. And on my next slide, where I say meet the agile talent, so I think we need, and this is very early stages of the development of the how understanding of agile talent management. We need to understand how people work collaboratively and who is leading and who is following and how those roles can change. And in the context of looking at teams, we also found that not always the top performers are the best team members. What we realized that the team requires diversity. If you put all very ambitious, very upwardly mobile, high potentials on the same team, that team might not have the same performance outcome as the teams that is the team that is composed of people with different abilities and different talents that come in at the different times in team production cycle. So on my next slide, I try to make that point, exactly that point. The talent management that we've inherited from the last century, and we continue to perfect, and we are much more advanced in our understanding of those exceptional few, is one way of looking at performance. The other way is really early stages of exploring and understanding what those collaborative teams mean and how those teams move in an agile way, and agile talent moving from the leading the work to following the leader to being an assistant, from being a leader to being an assistant, etc. Those constantly changing roles because of the, again, accelerated cycle of performance where different talents are being needed at different points in the project as it follows its cycle, development cycle. The other thing that we are beginning to understand in the agile view of talent is the importance of integrating the clients, the customers, students, if it is in the educational environment point of view, and how those new participants on the team may shift and change how the team operates. So it's not just the intact team in one organization. It's a much more diverse, collaborative unit that we need to understand better and develop better tools of managing those teams, developing those teams, nurturing and engaging those teams. And to me, to my next slide, needed team talent, I think we need to shift some of our research and some of our attention as practitioners from those high-performing individuals to high-performing teams. Some companies are beginning to make that significant break with the individuals-based talent management to the team-based talent management. The companies that I see doing it successfully at this point are primarily technology company. Cisco, for example, has developed a very extensive vocabulary, and with the use of big data, they're trying to understand the team dynamic better. To me, that's the area of, for all of us, and I want to finish on this invitation rather than closure, an invitation to explore, pay attention to, and better understand, and most importantly, share what that agile team talent management would look like. How do individuals perform at the best of their time, and when they have to follow and when they have to switch roles on the team, and how successfully they can do that oftentimes will determine how in the long run, at the end of the project, how successful that project would be. So it's not just the ability to lead 100% of the time, but it really is about contextually understanding your role on the team and playing to the team's strength to meet the expectations of the customers and the clients. And I want to finish with one quote that I picked up interviewing companies. That was from the Chief Transformation Officer of Bank of Montreal, Lynn Roger, who said that speed is the new business currency. And I think almost like with the theory of relativity, as we're becoming more agile and moving much faster, we will have to also rethink what talent means to us and what kinds of talents are going to emerge that we might not have noticed even 20 years ago. So with this optimistic note that work is just beginning to emerge on these important issues of who the talents are, I want to finish this and invite you for a reflection, questions, if we could help you and you help us understand this new challenging talent environment.
Thank you so much, Anna and Louis. That was incredibly informative, and wonderfully complex too. And going into this the seminar, I was expecting to have some answers, but of course, in a cutting edge situation like this, what we end up getting is some wonderful questions. You know, the questions begetting questions, and I certainly have plenty of my own. But before I take the lead on anything, I'd like to just invite anybody who's watching, especially Robert or Michelle. I know that you're online at the moment, and if either of you have any questions, feel free to simply unmute yourself, and we will go ahead and put you on the screen for your question. If you're watching us online, you're welcome to send us a text question, and we'll read it out loud for you. So Robert or Michelle, if you have any questions at this time, please feel free to unmute yourself, and we'll put you up on the screen. Robert.
Good morning, Anna and Luis. Nice to see you on the webinar of STADA, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. I just wanted to pick on one word that Anna has just mentioned, and the word is speed. I think as organization, as in today's context, not every organization is very nimble. And therefore, when you talk about speed, it's like, are we talking about movement that you would require immediate decision and therefore fast decision? Or when you are talking about speed, is it in relative to decision making in the context of an issue and everybody getting together in consensus on that issue? So maybe I'd like to seek some clarification on the word speed.
Thank you, Robert.
I can start, and maybe Louis, you can offer your thoughts. The way I use speed is speed of innovation, speed of change in the business models, a speed of product development. You know, if before, and I think we've talked about the Moore's law, right? That the speed of change, the product development cycle is accelerating in 2 years, double, I forgot exactly how it goes, but the Moore's law says that we're developing products, we are producing new outputs all the time, and the business has to keep up with this innovation. So it's the speed of innovation that changes everything, and that innovation also is becoming more and more disruptive. If you look back at, you know, the invention of the telephone and you know, the automobile, and how long it took for the next disruption to occur. Right now we are being disrupted, you know, pretty much every 2 years, even every 6 months by now. So that's how I see the companies are using speed as a, you know, as a sign of the times.
Yeah.
Louis,
yeah.
What do you think?
Thanks, Anna. Yeah. So just Moore's law is that the speed of processing computer power doubles every 2 years. So, which is your point, right? That we find exponential growth, but not just in processing power, but also storage size. You know, think of your laptop or your phone, how much information it can actually hold. And to answer the question around speed, you know, Robert, I don't think it's so much these days just around decision making, making quick decisions. I think there is so much experimentation in real time with customers and with products, because of what many companies are now offering and the way that they're interacting with their customers. You know, as the famous Facebook slogan goes, teams are asked to move fast and break things. You know, just get something out the door, and I read another amazing thing. So perfect is the enemy of good. So, you know, it's not about perfecting something, it's about getting something good out the door, getting people interacting with it, collecting data about their interaction, so their feedback from them, usage statistics, you know, how are we actually influencing their lives, collecting real data about that, and then building that straight back into the products that we're releasing, and that constant cycle. So actually, the idea that like a boss makes a decision, that decision filters down and causes things to happen, and then, you know, the boss then looks at the output and then makes a new decision, etc., is very old school. It's going to fade out, and what we'll be doing is relying on product teams to make really quick real-time decisions based on good data, so that they can make faster iterations and you know, a more progress in a shorter period of time. And I think a big part of what Anna's point is around Agile and the importance of team talent is the organizations that enable that process more effectively will succeed. So, you know, if you, as I was saying, when I was covering my piece, which is very much where we are now, we think of exceptional individuals as what talent is. And we want them to put those exceptional individuals in charge. What Anna is telling us is that we're now moving towards a place where actually it's exceptional teams that make a difference, and groups of exceptional individuals very rarely make the best team because of their characteristics, not their technical characteristics, but often their personalities. They all want to be, you know, the most impressive person, and that often doesn't lead to the most effective team outcomes. So, you know, I think we're in a very different age of speed, Robert, and we are seeing, you know, the outcomes of those sorts of things with the kind of technology that we now have.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Louis.
Thank you, Robert. And I can see that we have no questions online, so I'm going to jump in and just say, first of all, thank you so much food for thought. And I want to ask an intelligent question. I feel like such a babe in the woods. I'm afraid I'm going to ask a question you've already answered, but just to sort of contextualize before I ask you, it seems that you're sort of presenting, as I understand it, the present of talent management, which is the idea of identifying the individual who will be the next leader, versus a potential future of talent management, which is the recognition that teams of people who are not necessarily the top talents by today's paradigm actually produce the most productivity in companies moving forward, and identifying how to create those kinds of teams and put the right mix of talents and personalities together could be a very critical stage moving forward. Am I summarizing that fairly correctly, Anna?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And we've built, I really built on this one slide in Lewis's presentation that asked the question, talent for what? I think the team is the answer to that question, that you could have people, and this is the idea that pretty much everyone has a contribution to make if you select people the right way. So with the speed of change that we've talked about, this talent for what shows up all the time, and you've got to have it available on the team. And there's no way that one individual will have all of those qualities to make things happen. And therefore, what in leadership as well, we didn't talk much about leadership, although Louis did mention it, but I think the definition of the leader is becoming more and more leader as coach. Again, emphasizing the role of the leader on the team, how that particular individual can make everyone to play to their strengths at the right time and the right place, rather than have one person meet that particular pigeonhole.
And Anna, let me just add to this, because I think this is a really important and very meaningful point, which is you know, organizations still need leaders and managers. We need them because, you know, human society naturally drifts to hierarchy. So we tried this concept in business of holacracy, right? No manager, no leader, everyone is a leader, and doesn't work very well. It's rather difficult to get coherent and well-managed action and activity and output. So, you know, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. And, you know, this is why I think, you know, first of all, really good problem solving comes from really effective teamwork, a pool of knowledge and capabilities brought together to tackle a difficult problem. And there's great research on that around how people with a broader network find are more effective at solving difficult problems, etc. But we still then need a group of people or exceptional individuals to come up with the right problems, who are able to really identify, look, this is the most meaningful, impactful problem, and to have that vision and to really see into the future that no one else could, and to get us focused around that vision, which is, you know, for example, what Steve Jobs did remarkably well with Apple. Whether or not he was an amazing problem solver is kind of irrelevant, because we know from a design perspective, for example, Jonathan Ive was the design guy. But Steve Jobs was amazing at getting the organization focused on fixing problems he knew would create tremendous value for people. Putting, you know, unlimited songs in your pocket and a phone at the same time. You know, this was an idea that no one really had tackled before. So, you know, I think that this changes how we think about leadership, which, you know, right now is about, you know, results orientation, whatever. I'm not saying that that's not important, but, you know, the kind of talent that we think about for leadership positions and effective team players, and the role of a leader or manager in, you know, developing an effective team, I think really changes based on these ideas. So I think, you know, both are important simultaneously. But the nature of what we're trying to select into these positions and what we consider to be talent is really shifting rather quickly.
And just one more footnote to what Louis had to say. I totally agree with the importance of leadership. Unfortunately, from the perspective of what we know and how much we know, we are imbalanced in the direction and biased in the direction of, in all the research and all of the talent management literature. If you look at how much has been written about the great man in charge with that vision, that same, you know, quote about, you know, Steve Jobs' vision. Yeah. What I want to understand is the context of how he came about to this idea, and I am sure that there's a whole network and team of people that kind of helped them get to that place of innovation.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's at this point, from our talent management toolkit perspective, it's sort of invisible, and we need to pay attention to that.
Yes, and if I may just sort of and that thought before I move on to a question we have online, as you were speaking, it was occurring to me that there's perhaps a parallel here to the way we teach in the education system. And, you know, up until about 100 years ago, it was very Socratic, a single teacher with multiple levels of people in a room, teaching each of those students to their level. And then in the early 20th century, we went to the sort of the industrial model of one teacher to 40 or 50 or 70 in a classroom, which became very high, you know, strictly hierarchical and very leader oriented, very much like perhaps the way we identify talent today is to identify that one person who's going to be the speaker and everyone is going to be the followers. And perhaps what we're looking at now, when you talk about the leader as coach, is a return to that more Socratic style of educating that then leads to the more Socratic style of leading in a company. Just a thought. We have a question here from Leah Marie Lang, sorry if I mispronounced your name, and she writes, in your opinion, what are the personal characteristics of an exceptional team member?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I am just going to be kicked out of here because it's 9 o'clock at night and the place is closing. You know, Louis, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Okay. Yes, I can. Well, look, you know, I think unfortunately, like many very good questions, the answer is it depends on what the team is trying to do. But I think it's, again, I think this question is trying to boil down to the individual themselves. And I don't think that that is what we're saying. I think some of the things that Anna has said, and I think these are meaningful, is that it's about the way the team functions together and what norms it follows, and the sorts of feedback that people get, and the way that they exchange ideas and coordinate work. And that really is often a function of leadership and of effective management and of team norms and rules. So if you look at, like, for example, the Google G Team's work, they establish 5 very clear layers of things that are important for team effectiveness. The baseline being what they call psychological safety, which basically means I can speak up and say what I really think without others thinking worse of me. It means that I can be genuine and authentic in my views and challenge. And if we all can do that, we tend to function better together. So my view is that there's no one perfect individual team player, but as long as you have a group of people who follow effective team norms and rules, and understand that those are important, more so than their individual contribution, then you tend to get a more effective team. So I don't know, Anna, if you would agree or add anything.
Yeah, I totally agree, but I think that the really exceptional teams are those that in which these rules are internalized, and it becomes sort of second nature, because that's what Agile, the kind of Agile protocol is about. It's about setting those rules. But the high-performing teams take it to the next level. And we are in the very early stages of trying to understand. And I tell you which companies are working on it. Google definitely is working on it. Cisco is doing, and if you can read their work on what Cisco is writing about teams. And they themselves are very humble about how much they know, but they're trying to crack that code on what makes exceptional teams. And that's their talent management mandate right now, is not so much who are going to be our next leaders, as most organizations are trying to solve for that, but it's all about how can we replicate those high-performing teams, and what is the secret sauce to their performance. So that, as I said, it's just, my mission is to try to get the focus of bright and researchers like Lewis, and have more of us looking at the issue and coming up with solutions sooner rather than later. And I think we're all going to benefit as a society, as economy, and living in our communities as well, because those skills are transferable across all the roles that we play in life. So, and this is a little philosophical because it's the end of the day for me here in New York, and the cleaning people are coming in.
Yes. Yes. Oh gosh, this is such an interesting topic, and there's still so many questions I'd love to ask you, but we're conscious that our time is up, and in your case, Anna, you're desperately deserving to be able to wend your way home after a long day. So I just want to say thank you so much, and to tell our audience that this session will be archived in the STADA's YouTube channel, and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to watch or share the recorded version of today's webinar session. You can check STADA's website or follow us on social media to get the latest insights in the area of workplace learning and development. On behalf of STADA, we'd like to thank you so much, Anna and Lewis, for taking the time to share your expertise with us. And we wish you a very, very pleasant day, or in your case, Anna, a very pleasant evening.